Okay, guys, welcome to Science Today. So on Wednesday, I had you basically like label a plant cell, and then it talked about some of the functions. So we're going to continue working on cells. So this starts, it says, brief one, cell theory. Cells are the smallest units of life. All living things are made up of cells. This was not always known to us. Sometimes the discovery of something can only come about because a piece of technology has been invented to allow us to study it. That's what happened with the discovery of cells. Cells are very small. In fact, they are microscopic. In 1635, a scientist named Robert Hooke made a microscope and looked at a piece of cork through it. Hooke saw that microscopic piece of cork looked like a honeycomb. It was made of lots of tiny little areas he called cells. So cells that Hooke observed were not alive. The first person to observe a live cell in a microscope was Anton von Leeuwenhoek in 1674. He saw a type of algae called spirogyra. He called the tiny moving cells animalcules. So it says that the observation of Hooke and van Leeuwenhoek and others led the development of a theory about cells. Cell theory states the following. All living things are made of cells. Cells are the basic unit of living things, and all cells come from existing cells. So if you're about cell theory, it's those three things. Everything's made of cells. Cells are the basic unit of living things, and all cells come from existing cells. Then it says, what do cells do? While cells may be microscopic, they perform important and complex functions in living organisms. Cells must get food and nutrients, remove waste from the systems, and grow and reproduce. When cells can't carry out these life functions, they can die. There are some organisms that are made up of one or few cells, but there are much larger organisms like humans who are made up of trillions of cells. An organism is made up of many cells is called a multicellular. The prefix multi means many. So we have many cells in our body. Okay. So the second thing we're going to look at, and this was like kind of a word that was part of the cell, was the organelle. And it says cells are made up of different parts, help them carry out their life functions. A cell's life function include the following: eating, growing, and reproducing. So a different part of a cell that helps carry out these functions are called organelles. You may already know about the organelle called the nucleus. The nucleus is like the control center of the cell. But there are many other organelles, and each different organelle performs a different job. Okay, so let's look at these different types. Here are a list of other organelles that carry out important functions of the cell. Look at the diagram on page 19 to see how all these fit together. And let me see if we go down to page 19 here. I think page 19 must have been that diagram from yesterday. Okay. Oh, this might be it right here. Okay. So here's the list of other organelles that carry out important functions. The endoplasmic reticulum is an organ that helps to make and transport proteins and sugars around the cell. The vacuole is an organelle that stores and moves water around the cell and helps the cell to digest food and eliminate waste materials. The ribosome is an organelle that begins to turn material into cell proteins. The lysosome is an organelle that chemicals that help digest worn out organelles and other viruses and bacteria that might harm the cell. The organelle known as the cytoplasm is a kind of liquid in which all the other organelles are located. The cell membrane is an organelle that acts as a kind of skin for other organelles. It's a barrier that keeps harmful things out of the cell, but also lets helpful things into the cell. And on us, that would kind of be our skin, kind of our membrane. And the mitochondria is the organelle that generates chemical energy that all the cell uses to power the organelles. So here is that diagram I was talking about. So these are all those 9 things we just talked about. And this is, if you notice, this is an animal cell, not a plant cell. This is similar to what we would have in our body. So if we go back and look at what was the first one, it said the endoplasmic rectum is the organelle that helps make and transport proteins and sugars around the cell. So that one would be right there. And remember, the nucleus is in the center. That's like the brain center. And then you have the cell membrane, which is like our skin. So each one of these things has a function. They're just kind of listed right up here. Okay, and that's the diagram. And this says difference between cells. It said not all cells are exactly the same. The job of the particular cell determines what kinds of organelles will have. For example, muscle cells have a lot of mitochondria because they need lots of energy to move. But neurons, nerve cells, have lots of dendrites. Dendrites are like the branches of a tree. They are responsible for sending and receiving chemical signals in the central nervous system. And it says plant cells are also different from cells of animals. A plant cell pictured to the right has a cell wall that helps the plant keep its shape. It also has chloroplasts. These organelles contain the chlorophyll the plant needs to make its own food. So remember, there's different types of cells. So a plant cell and an animal cell are going to be different. Obviously, because plants and animals are two different things. Okay, so their cells are going to be different. Okay. So this is still about cells, organelles. So it's diffusion and osmosis. And this talks about, you have learned that cell membrane is like a barrier, but it also acts as a door. So it's kind of like our skin. The membrane keeps harmful molecules out of the cell while allowing helpful molecules like water and oxygen into the cell. Cells use two different processes to move molecules in and out of cells to the membrane. So, our skin basically is kind of like our barrier. It keeps things from trying to get into our body. But obviously, sometimes, you get cut or something, shot, stabbed, whatever, that basically breaks open the barrier to skin. And that's why, like, sometimes when you get cut, we're susceptible to an infection, okay? Because something has broken the barrier of our skin. Okay, so this says, generally substances move from a higher concentration to area low concentration. This process is called diffusion. That's what happens inside the cells. When there's the same amount of molecules on the inside of the cell is in a state of equilibrium. Diffusion can take place with any kind of helpful molecules that pass through the cell membrane. The process of osmosis works in the same way as diffusion, but osmosis only refers to the movement of water. Okay, so it's the state of equilibrium is important to the health of the cell. Imagine the cell as a balloon that's being filled with water and air. If you overfill a balloon with either gas or the liquid, it will burst. The same thing happens with cell. The process of diffusion keeps it from happening. Okay, so let's look at this. So if there are more particles outside the cell, you can see here, they diffuse in the cell until they evenly distribute. So you see in diagram 1, there's more of those little dots on the outside. So what we're trying to do is get equilibrium, and that's diagram 2. That's when there's equal amount of basically cells on the outside and cells on the inside to equally distributed. And that's what osmosis, or equilibrium, excuse me. We want equilibrium, okay? So in this case here, there are more particles inside the cell. So what happens? They have to move to the outside of the cell. That's what we want, equilibrium. That's when basically the cells basically are distributed equally. Okay. Okay, this is about cell division and reproduction. It's kind of how our cells reproduce. Obviously, like when you get a cut, basically, eventually that cut scabs up and the scabs goes away. That's really your skin cells reproducing until that wound is healed. So this says, is it possible that right at this moment you're 4 feet tall? You will continue to grow taller and taller until you stop growing about the age of 21. But what makes you grow taller and taller with each passing year? The answer is division of your cells. Cells are very small, so small they can't be seen without the aid of a microscope. But your cells have to do all the same things your body does to keep it healthy. Cells must take in oxygen, food, must remove waste products from their system, just like us. We need water and oxygen and food on a daily basis. The tiny size of a cell actually makes possible for cell to perform all these functions. Material that the cell needs can move from organelle to organelle quickly because the distance between each organelle is so small. If cells continue to get bigger and bigger, it would make this process more difficult. So this talks about division of cells. A single cell can only grow so big. Then how is it multi-cell organisms like us can grow bigger with age? The answer is each cell in a multi-cell organism divides. When the cell divides, it produces an exact duplicate of itself. New cells also replace old cells that are worn out. That's like sometimes too, you guys, when you get like maybe a sunburn or something and your skin peels, that's just really the old cells are dying off. Okay, they get damaged from the sun, and eventually, your skin basically starts to get really dry or dry skin too. Eventually those cells die off and new cells replace them. Okay, it says inside the nucleus of every cell is a DNA. And DNA is a chemical molecule that stores all the information for structure about how the organisms will grow and develop. For instance, the DNA of an elephant is different from the DNA of a shark. Cell division begins the process of mitosis. Mitosis means the cell nucleus, which contains the DNA, divides. The DNA coils and forms tubular structures called chromosomes. And chromosomes come in pairs, and each living organism has a different number of chromosomes. Human beings have 23 pairs of chromosomes, 46 altogether. During mitosis, the nucleus of each new cell receives a full set of chromosomes. Mitosis is complete when the cytoplasm divides. So from one cell, two identical cells are produced. And the flowchart on page 22 shows the different steps to develop production of new cells, and I'll show you this. Okay, so this would be a cell right up here. It says the cell makes a copy of the DNA and gets ready to divide. It says mitosis begins, chromosomes become visible, and the membrane around the nucleus dissolves. So the dotted line would be kind of the nucleus. Then pairs the chromosome copy lines of the center cell. So these X's basically pair up. Okay. Then each pair of chromosomes separates and the two halves move to opposite ends of the cell. So you would see 3 of the X's go to one side, 3 go to the other. So that says mitosis is complete as a new membrane forms around each cell. So this one cell now becomes 2. And you can see the 2 cells right here, and those X's are right there. So this one cell right here, you can see it's starting to split right here. You can see the 2 circles basically starting to form. And then mitosis is complete when the 2 new cells form. And then the cytoplasm divided. Animal cells, the cell membrane pinches inward, forming 2 identical cells. And plant cells, a new cell wall divides into one cell into 2. So you can see these 2 new cells here. So it goes from 1 to 2. You can see this cell right here is the same as these 2 right here, but it goes through this process right here. And that's just how cells divide and reproduce. So I'm going to stop there, and we'll pick this up next week because I know there's a lot here. But basically, you guys, one thing it'd be good to do is we did this yesterday. Just if you want to review kind of what each of these things do here, it'll help you maybe understand, because each part of the cell has a function, and it kind of talks about their functions kind of right in here. And then you can kind of see a picture of the cell right here. So like I said, this diagram might come up on the science part of the test. So don't expect you to memorize it, but just kind of be familiar with it. All right, you guys, I'm going to stop there. We'll pick this up next week. I'm going to start social studies here in about 15 minutes. So if I don't see you guys, have a wonderful weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.